Alright, I'm ready for you, Emu. I'm ready to take you on. Yeah, you better watch out. Here comes my rocket balloon fist. Yeah. Yeah, I taught you a lesson. Yeah. Oh, you want some more? Oh, come on. Bring it on. Bring it on. Hey everybody, welcome back to a brand new video. My name is 4D Clif, and you are enjoying a One Piece video on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for joining me. Let's get into the video. So yes, for today's topic in today's video, I'm going to go over two different things, okay? Two different things. The first thing, let's talk about the whole Luffy versus Emu thing that is basically coming up, right? Or should I say has already officially begun, but we're going to start getting into it most likely in the next chapter. Now, just for the record here, I've actually already read some of the spoilers for the next upcoming chapter. I'm not going to really speak of it, and I don't want to really go over like spoilers and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to keep that off the low end and everything, even though I know what's basically happening. So I'm not going to really talk about it. I'm just basically going to go over the conversations, Luffy versus Emu in more of like a personal, direct, right, meaning of how I basically view it, something like that. Okay, so yes, we are now officially getting into the whole Luffy versus Emu conflict, which is really something in itself, right? Now, originally, it probably wouldn't be that hard for anyone to assume or guess we were eventually going to get a Luffy versus Emu fight, okay? Now, beforehand, before we ever came to Elbaf, most people probably assumed and thought that Luffy would fight Emu at the Holy Land itself. However, it seems like Oda is literally bringing Emu somewhere else. That's not the Holy Land, which currently, at this moment in time, is actually Elbaf, okay? Now, I've actually mentioned this before plenty of times, maybe not like a whole bunch of times, but I've actually mentioned this before, that without a doubt, Luffy is not going to be Emu on his first attempt, okay? And this is pretty obvious in itself, and this technically isn't a spoiler, because if you follow One Piece and you are familiar with how Luffy does things and the fights that he has with the main antagonists in any arc he goes through and everything, Luffy never specifically ever defeats them on the first round, okay? He never really does that. There's always something that occurs where Luffy is basically knocked back, or, he falls unconscious, or whatever the scenario might be, and then eventually he has to basically rethink of a plan to figure out what's going on, and he comes back, and he basically fights them again. Sometimes this can be occurring like more than once or twice and everything, but yes, most definitely Luffy is not going to be Emu on his first attempt, but however, how it's going to unfold, what's actually going to occur, and how exactly will we expect to see Luffy grow in his development when fighting Emu is all laid out in how Oda is going to plan it, and I do believe it's going to be an interesting outcome to see where it could lead, okay? So yes, we are now officially into the whole Luffy versus Emu conflict and everything. So now it comes to the fact that both of them need to basically put up their dukes and just like start throwing the punches, like so pow 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 pow. So you see, that's basically how it goes. We're basically getting the smackdown, right? We were basically getting the whole, let's get ready to rumble. Oh. In this corner, we have Satan Arona Emu, King of the World, versus Monkey D. Luffy, Emperor of the Sea. Ladies and gentlemen, place your bets. Are you Team Monkey D. Luffy, or are you Team Satan Arona Emu? Choose your side, people. I know what side I'm on. Yeah. I'm on the Monkey D. Luffy side. And if you have a problem with that, and if you are here to come in to my channel, watch this video, and say, I support Satan Arona Emu, then please, by all means, get in the comment section, make sure to say that, that way everyone can know that you support Sorry? Let me say that over again. You did not hear that. To make sure everyone knows that you support Satan Arona Emu. Yeah, that way everybody will know. Ooh. Okay, let's just get into the video itself. Okay, so yes, we are actually getting the fight itself. So exciting, absolutely thrilling, encore, magnificent, whatever words you want to describe, whatever you can basically say to get your heart pumping, or whatever you can do to get your excitement pumping, right? Just like pump it up, pump it up, pump it up, pump it up, pump it up. Okay. However, here's the interesting parallel to basically talk about is the whole idea of how exactly can they be defeated, All right, because that's actually something important here to basically discuss, and that's actually what we're going to get into with the second part of this discussion of this video. So the first thing was basically just talking about how exciting it is that we're finally getting the Luffy versus Emu conflict, right? We're finally getting that, which a lot of people probably first assumed. Like I said, we were originally going to probably get that in the Holy Land itself. However, it seems like Oda is actually bringing Emu here. Now, whether or not that was first intentionalized from the very beginning, or if this was something that was basically changed at the last minute, it's hard to really determine that. So we'll have to wait and see if Oda ever actually reveals that. So keep in mind, while we don't know this officially just yet, let's just basically enjoy the fact that we're finally getting it after so many long waits ever since Emu was first revealed itself. Okay. So here it comes to how basically these enemies can be defeated, especially with Emu and the two Gods Knights, that being Summers and Killingham. Because it most likely seems is that the only way they can actually be officially defeated is with the help of Conqueror's Haki. Conqueror's Haki is basically the high-level supreme color Haki that is most likely. So put it simple, with Haki you have three different kinds. You have Observation Haki, you have Armament Haki, and you have Conqueror's Haki. Right? Which Conqueror's Haki can also be known as basically the will of the king itself. And where Observation Haki and Armament Haki can be manifested in anyone, Conqueror's Haki is basically a third stage that is only limited to a certain number of people. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is basically limited to a person based on the fact that you have to have a certain bloodline, right? It's not exactly this. It's not exactly like that. Okay, it's more of like you have to be worthy of it, right? You basically have to have the potential, the worth to obtain King's Haki, right? Like you have to actually be worthy of it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that anyone can actually have it, but anyone can attain it if you are worthy of it. So that's basically to summarize. And we find out from Gabon, right? From Gabon himself, that when Gabon was able to basically defeat Summers, right? He was able to basically split Summers in half, and he was able to do this due to the fact that the Conqueror's Haki that he knows. And originally, none of the Straw Hats were able to defeat Summers. Now, it's important to understand that Summers has finally come back and regenerated, and this was actually due to the fact that Emu, when he arrived on Elbaf, he was able to help restore both Summers and Killingham to their full potential. So most likely, it seems like the Straw Hats are going to need to understand and learn Conqueror's Haki, but that's a bit of a problem because only two of them are actually confirmed to have Conqueror's Haki. Luffy, who we know for a fact most definitely has King's Haki. As a matter of fact, when Luffy was fighting against Kaido, Luffy actually basically learned and discovered that he can imbue his attacks with Conqueror's Haki. Now, this is almost identical and similar, not exactly the same thing, but almost similar to the fact that you can imbue Armament Haki in items as well. And there's two types of Armament Haki when you think about it. There is the hardening aspect, which can actually act more of a defense, and then there is the more physical attack variant, where you can basically turn the defense into an offense. So I'm sure you've ever heard that phrase or saying, like, the greatest offense is the best defense, and the best defense is the greatest offense. So basically, you can turn the Armament Haki into not just a defense, but also into offensive power as well. And Conqueror's Haki is more like the fact that it's basically your sheer willpower overcoming the individual itself, right? Your willpower is over attaining the enemy within, right? You're basically destroying themselves, okay? And Luffy, we know for a fact that Luffy, most definitely, while Luffy has basically learned that he can do this, he's probably not really an expert at it just yet, okay? Because if you think about it, when Luffy was fighting against the Gorosei on Egghead, he did mention that even though he was using Conqueror's Haki, he wasn't able to deal any direct damage to them itself. So that was a little confusing. But most likely, it can assume that Luffy is still struggling with it, right? He's not really an expert just yet. I mean, heck, he has learned it, and he does understand the potential of it, but most likely there is something that he's still not getting. He's still basically keeping himself grounded and not really rising above that just yet. So maybe this fight with Emu is actually going to push that to another level, and we'll have to wait and see how that will basically turn out. Okay. So yes, Luffy most definitely needs to understand and get a better understanding of how this King's Haki can work when he's imbued it with his attacks, okay? And how exactly can he utilize it to another level, to the point where he can physically do harm and damage onto Emu. Really, it really comes down to understanding how the thing will play out, right? How exactly will Luffy understand this, and how exactly will he utilize it for the outcome in order to save everyone in Elbaf, the giants, the giant children, even his crew members as well. That way no one suffers under the fateful wrath of Emu himself and the Gods Knights. Okay. So now that we got the whole Luffy versus Emu discussion out of the way, let's move on to some other characters as well, because I feel like it's important to go over some potential ideas in Conqueror's Haki and other members. So we know for a fact that Zoro himself has Conqueror's Haki, because this was officially confirmed by Monkey D. Luffy, who mentioned that, wait, you didn't know you have Conqueror's Haki? You're like spilling out everywhere, right? So yes, Zoro has Conqueror's Haki, and Zoro unlocked his Conqueror's Haki most definitely with this fight with King himself, right? So yes, we can definitely establish that Zoro himself has Conqueror's Haki. Now the problem remains is that Zoro obviously never understood that he had Conqueror's Haki, so he's definitely going to need to understand and exactly figure out how he can utilize Conqueror's Haki himself, right? Remember, Luffy did the 2-year training with Rayleigh and was able to train himself on how to utilize all 3 Hakis themselves, including Conqueror's Haki. Zoro, on the other hand, is going to have to figure this out himself. However, aside from Zoro, there is another potential member who might also receive King's Haki in this arc as well, and that is specifically Sanji, all right? So, in the current chapter right now, Sanji himself, it was actually revealed that Sanji, who actually asked Gabon if he could actually have King's Haki, right? If he could actually have it as well, and Gabon told him that you do possess the qualities these to have King's Haki, right? You do possess the qualities of having Conqueror's Haki, but at the same time, it's hard to basically describe it, but it sounds like he's saying like there is something that's holding Sanji back, right? Like there is something that is preventing Sanji from accessing or obtaining that level, and he's basically telling Sanji that you will need to basically figure that out, because if you can't, then you won't be able to help your captain become king of the pirates. And that's something that Sanji is going to need to understand and learn, is like, how can I attain King's Haki? How can I defeat Killingham and basically help my captain become king of the pirates, right? And when it comes to the Straw Hat crew, Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji are always attained as the top 3 notch fighters, right? They are basically the head himself, the right wing, the left wing, basically like that. Okay, all right. However, before we officially get into everything, before we get into everything else, there's something else that I want to point out here that I think is very interesting. Okay, so there is actually an interesting parallel to discuss here. Okay, all right. So think of it like this, right? Remember in Wano when Zoro was facing off against King, right? King, who was one of the beast pirates, King the Conflagration, and I believe that's what his monarch was. Okay. Now remember, King is not his official real name, but it was the title that he had when he was a member of the Beast Pirates. So Zoro was facing off against King when he attained or unlocked Conqueror's Haki. Now we are in Elbaf, and Sanji is going up against Killingham. All right, Killingham. Zoro faced off against King. King is a direct word itself, right? King can be basically seen as the direct word. However, if you look at Killingham's name, you can actually find the spelling of King in his name, right? You can actually spell King with Killingham's name, all right? Like, literally, I'll have it up right here, right? Just look at it, all right? See? Look very carefully, like, all right? You can actually spell King with Killingham's name. So that is something in and of itself, that Sanji is going up against someone in this arc with a name that can actually spell King, all right? Now, it's not exactly the same in terms of like a direct translation, but it's more like you have to actually pay attention, right? You have to basically, it's more like a wordplay, right? You have to basically look at it from a different angle, right? But you can spell King with Killingham's name, and Sanji is going up against someone himself in this arc, just like Zoro did back in Wano, where he faced off against King, and he unlocked a Conqueror's Haki, or basically the King's Haki, right? You have the potential to become a king, and most likely Sanji could also obtain that himself. Okay. And obviously with the fact that, Monkey D. Luffy is currently facing off against Emu himself, who is known as King of the World, going up against Monkey D. Luffy, who is Emperor of the Sea. Okay. So now we established that, now that we got out of the way, let's move on to other potential characters. Now, when we actually think about all the Straw Hats in general, or every single Straw Hat, how many or which one of them are actually going to be potentially worthy to unlock or have King's Haki? There are 2 potential characters that we can most likely summarize a potential idea that they could receive King's Haki, because it was stated in the manga not as more of a direct answer, not more of like a 100% positive answer that was actually confirmed 100%, but more something that was mentioned as something you could basically see as like, oh, this was just a gag, this was just a joke, this was just something to just say to move the chapter along, right? Yes, that's all fair and well, but let's think of it from another positive view, that Oda mentioned this to get us ready, that Oda had these things said within these chapters at those moments because he wants us to be prepared to know that, oh, these two characters themselves are also going to have Conqueror's Haki, right? These two characters themselves. But who exactly are these two characters, right? Well, without a doubt, these two characters have to be Usopp and Nami. Let's go over Usopp first. So Usopp, right now, Usopp has basically dreamt of coming to Elbaf, right? He admires the warriors of Elbaf, and he basically wants to become a great warrior of the sea, and he sees Elbafs as the pride and joy of, how warriors should live, how warriors should be honored themselves, okay? And Usopp wants to basically follow that standards. Now, Usopp himself was obviously disappointed when he came to Elbaf and understand that their whole values of warriors had basically downgraded and everything. But most likely Usopp has dreamt of coming to Elbaf, and a lot of people want Elbaf to be an arc that Usopp can actually learn something, right? Because if you think about it, he wasn't able to achieve anything beforehand, right? Usopp hasn't actually achieved a greater level of, basically hasn't attained a greater level of outstanding performance that would make everyone see and say like, yes, finally Usopp's getting something, yeah! We still haven't got that yet, right? And maybe Elbaf will be the chance to prove that. Okay, and if you remember back in Wano and everything, and how, well, actually, before we actually get into that, we have to basically mention something here that Usopp that has a unique ability when it comes to his lies, because when it comes to his lies, they can come true in some form or some way, right? They always come true. And in Wano and everything, after a whole bunch of beast pirates got knocked out due to Big Mom's Conqueror Haki going through the walls and everything, Usopp claimed it as his own power. He claimed it and said that, oh, they fell down because they could not handle the intense power of my pressure. Everyone falls beneath me. So, yes, we all know how it is with Usopp's lies, right? They always come true to a potential extent. And in some form or some way, they do come true. So maybe that is something in itself where Usopp could obtain Conqueror's Haki. How he's going to attain it, when he's going to attain it, if he'll even contain it, I'm not sure. I don't know. But we'll have to wait and see to find out for sure. All right. Now moving on to Nami, who will basically end it off with everything else, right? Okay, so yes, Nami herself. If I had to summarize between Usopp and Nami, who do I think potentially is going to be the actual next person, right? Who do I actually think would be worthy of it between those two only? I would probably go with Nami and everything. However, I can also understand the value of how a lot of people would want Usopp, and that's no disgrace to anything at all. And if Oda wants it to be Usopp, then I'm perfectly okay with it, okay? I mentioned this numerous times. I want Oda to tell his story the way he wants it to be told, and I always think that's important to understand. So let's think about Nami herself, right? How exactly can we say without a doubt that Nami has potential, right? How can we say for a fact that Nami herself is basically worthy of having Conqueror's Haki? What exactly is there to actually state that for any reason? Well, remember what I said that how Oda could just basically have these things in as, joke or reference and everything? If you think about it, after the Straw Hats left Wano or everything, when Luffy did that whole stupid thing where he basically took the Sunny and basically jumped off the edge of Wano to have basically a confrontation with Kid Pirates and Law Pirates and Elf to basically prove that he wasn't chicken and weakening out and taking the safe route out. Nami was not very thrilled with that and basically had to throw Luffy in a cage. However, in that moment, when you think about it, Jinbei was basically trying to calm Nami down and say, hey, Nami, calm down, right? Look, we all managed to survive, right? There's nothing seriously going on. And Nami herself literally told Jinbei, don't coddle him, Jinbei, and at that moment, she was letting off a very powerful energy that was freaking Jinbei out. Jinbei himself was literally freaking out and literally saying, or like literally believing that she is emanating Conqueror's Haki, right? Like, this was insane. Like, okay? Now, yes, you can definitely say that this is most likely a joke, but at the same time, you can also say that, hey, Oda might be telling us to keep our eyes open on Nami, and that is potential. That is honestly a possibility in itself. Now, you don't have to necessarily want Nami or even Usopp to have Conqueror's Haki, right? But there are people out there who would very much enjoy it as well, and I'm also one of those people who would actually very much enjoy it as well. And another thing to actually look at when you want to think about something itself is that, Nami herself is obviously described as a queen, all right? Nami herself is obviously labeled as a queen. Luffy, who is, Luffy himself is trying to aim to become king of pirates, and anytime, like, there's ever a color spread that utilizes a king and queen aspect, Luffy is always the king, while Nami is always the queen, all right? You can even look to the fact that Nami herself is basically described as a weather queen, right? The fact that she can manipulate and control the weather thanks to her climate tat, and that even goes even further because she has the big the homie Zeus as her arsenal to help deal damage to her enemies, right? And that's actually something in itself, because if Nami herself can ever awaken Conqueror's Haki, right? If she can ever learn to utilize Conqueror's Haki, then her ideas of like embedding that into her weapons, especially to the fact that if she can do this, right? If she can figure out how to do Conqueror's Haki and imbue those into her weapon ends, then the whole destruction of Zeus himself can become even powerful with his lightning bolts that is coming down with Conqueror's Haki reigning supreme, right? Just listen to those bolts of lightning. Just listen to the skies, right? And you can hear that lightning and thunder coming out. I tell you, if you're hearing that right now, that is Nami herself, right? That is the power of Nami. Just listen. Just listen. You can actually hear the sounds. See? You hear that? You hear that? That's the power of Nami. That's the power of our queen. That's the power of our goddess. We better not make her mad, people. We better not make her mad. Okay. So, yes. I think that will do it for the video itself. Nothing really to officially discuss. I suppose we could go over the other characters. However, I'm going to limit to those potentially because I think they're probably the most worthy, right? They're probably the most potential-wise, right? And not to mention, everyone I mentioned are all members of the East Blue, right? The ones who came from the East Blue. So that could be something in itself if Oda is going to limit it to everyone in the East Blue. Oh, that being Monkey D. Luffy, Zoro, Nami, Usopp, and Sanji most likely are the potential and the only members who could attain it or are going to have it. Now, whether or not this is officially 100% actually going to occur and happen directly, and then it could be possible that Oda is only going to limit it to Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji, with maybe the potential and the idea that, Nami and Usopp, they do have the potential, they are worthy of having King's Haki, but it could also be the fact that maybe they're not going to have King's Haki until the end of the series, right? Like maybe there's going to be an epilogue at the end where we cut to say like 20 years later, and it revealed that Nami actually managed to attain King's Haki, right? Same thing with Usopp himself when he finally became a brave warrior of the sea and he was able to obtain King's Haki. How actually this will play out, how this can actually occur, I'm not sure, but we'll have to wait and see what Oda does, okay? So yes, that will do it for this video itself, right? This will do it for everything to basically discuss. We'll have to wait and see how everything turns out. However, another thing to actually point out here that is a bit of a problem is that even though Sanji is going up against Killingham, he's also going up against Zaza, right? And we all know how Sanji's beliefs are and how he will not face women, right? How he will not basically ever hit women, right? And that's a bit of a problem in itself because while Ringo Zaza is just a manifestation of a dream that Killingham made, she still has the appearance of a woman itself. So that's a bit of a problem. So how exactly he's going to overcome that is really interesting. So it could be the fact that he's going to have to rely on someone else in order to help beat Zaza and free the children. Right? Since last time it was Robin who basically helped Sanji in that moment when he was facing off against Black Maria, most likely this time the best candidate in this case would be Nami. Now, whether or not that's actually going to happen or how that's going to occur, not really 100% sure. But of course, Nami also probably wouldn't be the best option if you think about it, because her main primary attack focus is utilizing Zeus and his lightning bolts. And if Zaza is made of water, lightning and water do not mix. All right. So if you think about it, that's probably going to be a bit of a problem, because if she strikes the lightning bolt down on Zaza, then the children that are literally contained inside Zaza are going to be getting electrocuted. So that's probably not the best option when you think about it. Okay. Okay, so that will do it for today's video. This will do it for everything. If you liked my video, you like anything I discussed, please let me know in the comment section below, alright? If you did enjoy the video, please subscribe to the channel, hit notification bells, and stay tuned for another video as soon as possible. Thank you. You all have a great day. Goodbye, everybody.